The room smelled faintly of roasted turkey and old pine, but the tension was thicker than the gravy on the table. 15 relatives sat stiffly in the Harper family's old dining hall, their eyes flicking between me and my older sister, Catherine. I adjusted my shawl, trying to ignore the knot tightening in my stomach. At 66, I had learned that family gatherings weren't just about celebration, they were about judgment, comparisons, and old wounds scraped open. Catherine stood at the head of the table, wearing her usual silk blouse and pearls, the kind she reserved for moments when she wanted to be taken seriously. "Elena," she said, her voice smooth but sharp, "it's time we revisit your rent at the condo." She didn't ask, she declared. "Effective next month, it will be $5,400. The words landed like a hammer strike. Aunt Marjorie gasped softly, while Uncle Paul coughed as if clearing space for their own opinions. My cousins exchanged glances, some smirking, some uncomfortable. And me? I smiled slightly, though the room didn't notice. I had a secret Catherine didn't know, a quiet strength she had underestimated for years. I let her continue, letting the words of judgment hang in the air. "I've been subsidizing your lifestyle for decades," she said, tapping a ledger she had brought along. "You've been lucky to enjoy this apartment at such a reduced rate. Market value is double, Elena, double. I've given you everything you could never earn on your own." I nodded politely, remembering Grandma's advice from long ago. The quiet ones are the ones who see everything. Never underestimate them. And that quiet one, me, was about to show the family just how much she had been underestimated. Years ago, when Grandma was still alive, she had whispered to me during one of her Sunday afternoons sorting through the family estate. "Catherine shines bright, yes, but the ones who move silently often build empires in the shadows. One day, you'll see it." At the time, I didn't fully understand. But after Grandma passed, her personal lawyer had called me offering guidance on a separate inheritance she had quietly set aside, enough to secure a future I hadn't dared dream of. Now, as Catherine clicked through graphs and charts, outlining my supposed debt to her generosity, I let the room watch her arrogance. They didn't know that the building she thought she owned, the condo she claimed to control, had been mine for 3 years, purchased quietly, legally, and decisively. Every lease signed, every renovation approved, every penny collected. Through me, through my holding company. When she finally looked at me, expecting a defeated nod, I held her gaze firmly. My lips curved into a faint smile. She didn't notice it. She thought silence was submission. The dinner table felt smaller, the air tighter, as I realized how sweet the irony was going to be when the truth came out. This wasn't just about rent. This was about dignity, justice, and the years of quiet endurance finally paying off. And tonight, the Harper family was about to witness it all. As the last fork clinked against the plate, I leaned back slightly, letting Catherine dominate the spotlight for a few more seconds. I had learned long ago that silence was a weapon. The longer she spoke, the more obvious it became how little she truly understood me. Growing up as Catherine's younger sister was like living in a perpetual shadow. She had always been the golden child, the brilliant lawyer, the social butterfly, the one every relative praised. Awards, promotions, the perfect lifestyle, everything she touched turned into a story worth retelling at family gatherings. And me? I was the quiet one, the steady one, the safe sister no one really noticed. After school, I had pursued something more grounded, urban property management. Not glamorous, not headline-grabbing, but honest work that demanded patience, vision, and discipline. I loved walking through aging buildings, imagining the life they could lead if cared for properly. While Catherine flaunted her achievements, I built my own quiet empire, in small steps, unseen, unnoticed. Grandma had always recognized that strength. I remember her tapping her glasses and whispering during one of our Sunday afternoons. Catherine may be loud, but Yelena, you are the one who understands how to make things last. Don't underestimate your own power. At the time, I smiled politely and tucked her words away. Life continued in its usual rhythm. My parents, while loving, often nodded politely at her words, never truly seeing the years of careful planning and dedication I had quietly invested. I never argued. I never complained. That wasn't my way. But I listened. I observed. And I learned. 3 years ago, Grandma's final gift changed everything. She had set aside a discrete portion of her estate, a small building in the heart of the city. Through careful planning, discreet accounts, and patient legal steps, I had acquired it under a holding company. The building had been mine for years, quietly generating income, quietly building a foundation strong enough to survive any attempt at humiliation. Tonight, as Catherine paced by the table, her pearls clinking, I let the memories wash over me. I remembered every dinner where her words stung, every party where I was the other sister, every comment disguised as concern but meant to highlight my perceived inadequacy. All of it had led to this moment. Catherine raised her voice, her charts now decorated with colorful graphs and numbers designed to intimidate. Yelena, you've benefited from me for decades. The market has changed, and it's only fair that you contribute appropriately. The family murmured in agreement, some nodding, some avoiding my gaze. But I had already prepared my response, silently rehearsing every word for years. And tonight, I would not be rushed. Tonight, the quiet sister would step forward, not in anger, but in truth. I glanced down at the folder tucked neatly under my arm. In it were the deeds, the legal papers, the proof of ownership, evidence of my careful strategy. Catherine had no idea that the power she wielded so casually had already been taken from her without her noticing. I adjusted my shawl again and allowed myself a faint smile. She thought she was teaching me a lesson, but in reality, the lesson she would learn was far more important and far more permanent. The room was still tense, the air thick with anticipation, as I sipped my tea and waited for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. The quiet ones, Grandma had said, see everything. And tonight, everything would be seen. The room was alive with conversation, yet every eye seemed glued to Catherine. She spoke as if she owned not only the building, but also every moment in the room. Her voice echoed off the high ceilings, filling the dining hall with authority and judgment. But I remained still, a quiet observer in plain sight. At 66, I had learned the value of patience. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated had honed a skill far more potent than anger. Strategic calm. While Catherine's words painted me as dependent and lacking ambition, I had been quietly assembling a network of tenants, lawyers, and business contacts who would be my allies when the time was right. I remembered evenings spent poring over financial statements, studying market trends, negotiating small repairs, and quietly documenting every transaction. These actions were invisible to the family, but they were building something much larger than recognition. They were building leverage. Catherine's latest declaration about rent increases was meant to assert dominance, but I had learned to recognize the cracks beneath her polished surface. Every flourish, every graph, every stern word was a performance, and performances could be countered, exposed, or even turned against the performer. As she detailed how my rent should reflect market value, she had no idea that the condo, the building she thought she controlled, was legally mine. Every lease, every repair, every tenant payment all flowed through the holding company I had created years ago, in secret. Uncle Paul shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable,
and whispered to Aunt Marjorie, "She's really stepping on her younger sister's toes this time." But they didn't notice the quiet calculation behind my eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I let Catherine continue, her voice rising, her frustration beginning to seep into the edges of her performance. Years of subtle observation told me exactly when she would pause, exactly when she would glance at the family for validation, and exactly when her composure would falter. I had rehearsed this in my mind countless times, each moment of condescension catalogued, each overconfidence noted. "Effective next month, your rent will be $5,400, she repeated, as if the repetition would cement her authority. A few relatives murmured approval, but I ignored them. I had a different audience, the truth itself, and the inevitability that it would soon speak louder than her words ever could. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the liquid warm me while my mind replayed every memory of past humiliations. The whispered, "She's lucky to have that apartment," comments, the sighs of exasperation when I asked simple questions, the subtle reminders that I was the lesser sister. And I allowed myself a single thought, a quiet but powerful one. All of that ends tonight. Catherine didn't notice the folder beneath my arm, nor did she sense the quiet confidence radiating from my posture. I wasn't preparing to confront her with anger. I was preparing to reveal the undeniable truth. And, in truth, the power she had wielded so effortlessly for decades had already slipped from her fingers. She just didn't know it yet. The family's attention wavered. Some were captivated by Catherine's display of authority. Others were restless, sensing tension but unsure why. But I remained the eye of the storm, composed and patient, knowing that the climax would not arrive from her aggression, but from my quiet, deliberate revelation. Grandma had said it years ago, "The quiet ones are the ones who see everything." I had seen. I had waited. And tonight, I would act. A faint chime from the front door echoed through the dining hall. Heads turned instinctively. I smiled. Perfect timing.
The chime of the front door echoed through the Harper dining hall like a trumpet announcing the unexpected. Catherine's eyes flicked toward it, her composure momentarily shaken. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her blouse, and offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll handle that," she said, striding toward the foyer with the air of someone commanding attention. I remained seated, calm, letting her leave the room. I could see the family shifting in their chairs, some curious, others anxious. Their eyes kept returning to me, as if expecting me to flinch, to react. But I had spent decades learning patience. Reaction was for the unprepared. Observation and timing was everything. Minutes passed. Catherine returned, flustered, muttering under her breath about a delivery that hadn't arrived. Yet the faint sound of footsteps approached, deliberate, confident. When the door opened fully, a man in a tailored navy suit stepped in, briefcase in hand. His presence was commanding, but neutral, exuding professionalism without drama. "Good evening," he began, his voice calm, measured, and entirely in control of the room. "I am Mr. Whitman, representing Harper Properties, LLC. He placed the briefcase on the table, opening it with careful precision. Out came neatly stacked folders, thick with documents that gleamed under the warm chandelier light. These documents concern the ownership and management of the Harper condominiums. Catherine froze mid-step, her hands clenching the back of her chair. What are you talking about?" she stammered, her usual confidence cracking for the first time in decades. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the moment stretch. "Please," I said, softly, my voice carrying clearly over the stunned whispers of the relatives, "allow him to explain." Mr. Whitman looked around the room, ensuring every eye was on him. "Ms. Elena Harper," he said,
pausing for effect, is the sole legal owner of this property. Every lease, every tenant payment, and every legal document has been in her name for 3 years. A gasp rippled through the family. Catherine's face drained of color, her perfectly maintained posture faltering for the first time in decades. She opened her mouth, searching for words, but none came. You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've managed this building. I've been in charge of everything." "Yes," I replied, calm and steady. "You managed it, but you did not own it. And your attempts to raise my rent tonight," my eyes met hers, unwavering, "futile." Uncle Paul coughed, trying to regain some authority, muttering, "But the charts, the leases." Mr. Whitman gestured to the folders, opening one to reveal color-coded documents, signatures, and official stamps. "All verified," he said. "Ms. Harper has been acting on behalf of the holding company, legally the owner. You were a tenant in a building that legally belongs to her." The room went silent, the ticking of the old grandfather clock suddenly loud in the tense stillness. Catherine sank into her chair, disbelief etched across her face. The smugness she wielded so easily had dissolved entirely. I smiled faintly, not with glee, not with vengeance, but with the quiet satisfaction of decades of patience, planning, and quiet strategy. For the first time, I felt the full weight of years of careful work paying off in a single, undeniable moment. "You see," I said, softly, addressing Catherine in the room, "this is not about humiliation. It is about recognition, of preparation, of quiet persistence, and of truth." Cousins whispered, aunts gasped, and even my parents shifted uneasily, finally realizing that the roles they had long assigned were now reversed. Catherine's empire of superiority had been built on assumptions, and those assumptions had crumbled in the face of patient strategy. The room had changed, the balance had shifted, and I, the quiet one, had orchestrated it flawlessly. The room seemed to shrink around Catherine. Her carefully constructed confidence had collapsed like a house of cards. I remained seated, calm, letting her realize, piece by piece, what had just happened. The family was frozen in suspense, their eyes darting between us as if waiting for a battle to erupt. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her pearls. This can't be," she whispered, her voice shaky. You've been hiding this? Why? How?" I leaned forward, my hands resting on the table, my voice steady and deliberate. "Not hiding, Catherine. Planning. I did exactly what Grandma taught me. Observe, prepare, and act with intention. While you performed for everyone, I built quietly. That building, every tenant, every lease, it's mine. Legally, fully. And your attempts tonight to raise my rent? Futile." Aunt Marjorie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Uncle Paul cleared his throat, his face pale. Even my parents, who had always tried to mediate between us, sat frozen, their silence speaking louder than any words could. Catherine shook her head violently, as if denial could restore her authority. "You can't! This isn't fair! I managed the building for years. I helped run it. How could you—" I smiled faintly, patiently, and met her gaze. "I helped run it, yes, but you never owned it. You assumed control without asking, thinking I would always be the quiet one, the obedient one, the sister who never challenged your authority. Tonight proves that assumption wrong." The room murmured, the weight of the truth settling like a thick fog. Cousin Derek's usual smirk had vanished, replaced by shock. Even my aunt and uncle, who normally sided with Catherine, shifted uncomfortably. You've been paying rent to yourself?" Catherine whispered, disbelief twisting her features. "Yes," I said softly, letting the word hang in the air. "The rent, the leases, the management. It all flows through my holding company. You were a tenant in a building you thought you controlled. Her hands shook as she reached toward the lease she had slapped on the table moments ago, as if touching it could rewrite reality. "This isn't right! You tricked me!" "No, Catherine," I said firmly, my voice resonant. "I simply stopped letting you trick me. You tried to humiliate me, to assert superiority. But I was ready. And now the truth is clear." Mr. Whitman stepped forward, his briefcase open to reveal deeds, tax records, and official signatures. All legal documents confirm ownership. Ms. Elena Harper is the sole proprietor. Every tenant, including Catherine herself, pays rent directly to her company. Catherine froze, her face pale, her posture collapsing. She tried to speak, to argue, but no words came. Her authority, the same authority she wielded with such confidence over decades, was gone. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a calm satisfaction wash over me. I didn't need to yell, to shame, or to provoke. The room had witnessed the quiet, undeniable power of preparation and patience. The years of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed had culminated in this moment of truth. "You see," I said softly, addressing both Catherine and the room, "being quiet doesn't mean being powerless. It means observing, learning, and acting when the moment is right. Tonight is that moment." Whispers filled the room, the tension tangible. Catherine's eyes darted to my parents, seeking some form of support, some acknowledgement that she still held sway. But for the first time, they had no words, no defense, no intervention. The quiet one, the sister who had been underestimated all these years, was standing taller than ever. And the family, finally, could see it.
The room had gone silent, a heaviness settling over everyone like an unspoken truth had just been unveiled. Catherine sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound, while the family's eyes darted nervously between us. The air felt thick, charged with tension, as though even the walls were holding their breath. I stood slowly, letting my movements be deliberate, unhurried. Years of being underestimated had taught me the power of calmness in chaos. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to demand recognition. The truth, once revealed, spoke louder than any argument could. "Catherine," I began, my tone steady, firm but not cruel. "For years, you assumed control over what you never truly owned. You attempted to teach me a lesson, to assert dominance in front of our family. And yet, here we are." I let the words hang in the air, watching as comprehension slowly dawned on her. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her legal pad, the graphs and numbers that once intimidated everyone, now meaningless. But I managed it," she stammered, desperation creeping into her voice. "Yes," I acknowledged, my voice calm. "You managed it, but management does not equal ownership. Authority does not equal control. You performed while I built. You lectured while I planned. And tonight, the balance has shifted." Whispers rippled through the room. Aunt Marjorie leaned forward, her eyes wide. I had no idea," she muttered. Uncle Paul cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable, while cousins exchanged astonished glances. Catherine's face contorted with disbelief. "This isn't fair. You tricked me." I shook my head gently, suppressing a small smile. "No, Catherine, I didn't trick you. I simply stopped letting you control me. The building, the leases, the tenants, they've been under my company for years. And tonight, you are witnessing the truth firsthand." Mr. Whitman stepped forward again, placing the official documents on the table for everyone to see. "All property records, tax receipts, and legal deeds confirm that Miss Elena Harper is the sole owner. Every tenant, including Catherine herself, pays rent directly to her company. The ownership is complete and legally binding." Catherine's body slumped slightly, the weight of realization settling over her. The authority she had wielded for decades evaporated in a single, undeniable moment.
Her eyes flicked to my parents, as if seeking backup, but they sat silent, caught between shock and the inability to intervene. I took a deep breath, letting the room absorb the significance of what had just unfolded. Family, I said, my voice soft, but carrying. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who see everything, who prepare, who plan, and who endure. Tonight is not about revenge. It is about truth. It is about fairness, and it is about standing tall in the story of your own life. The murmurs grew louder as relatives began to process what they were seeing. Cousin Derek, usually so smug and dismissive, stayed silent, his eyes fixed on Catherine. Aunt Patricia whispered, almost reverently, She's stronger than we ever realized." Catherine's face had turned pale, and for the first time in her life, she looked small. The power she had relied on, her words, her condescension, her control of appearances, had been rendered meaningless. I felt a calm satisfaction wash over me. Not vindictive satisfaction, but the deep, steady contentment of someone who had endured, planned, and finally claimed their rightful place. The quiet one, underestimated for so long, was finally seen. As I returned to my seat, the family's eyes lingered on me with a new recognition. The shift was complete. The roles had changed, and for the first time, I felt the weight of past humiliation lift entirely. This was not the end. There would be conversations, questions, perhaps even resentment. But the foundation had been laid. The quiet one was no longer invisible. The quiet one had won. The following morning, the sun rose over the city, casting long, golden rays across the streets below. I walked through the lobby of my building, now fully mine, feeling the weight of ownership settle like a warm blanket. The smell of freshly polished wood and the faint scent of paint from recent renovations reminded me that I had not only claimed legal control, but had also breathed new life into a place long neglected. Neighbors greeted me warmly, smiling as I unlocked the doors and checked the notices. They noticed the difference, small but significant. Hallways were cleaner, maintenance requests addressed promptly, and the aura of professionalism radiated through every corner. Where Catherine had prioritized appearances, I focused on care. Where she had demanded compliance, I encouraged respect. The day carried a quiet victory. Yet, as I checked on the tenants and reviewed paperwork, I couldn't ignore the whispers. Family members had begun making calls, sending hesitant texts, and even dropping by under the guise of curiosity. Aunt Patricia had already arrived, peering around the lobby with a mixture of awe and hesitation. "She's really done it," she murmured under her breath, glancing at me as I handed a tenant their new lease packet. "I didn't think she had it in her." I smiled politely. "Sometimes people underestimate the quiet ones," I said softly. "They forget that patience, planning, and action taken together can achieve what shouting never could." Meanwhile, Catherine had begun appearing sporadically, lingering near the building's entrance, watching me handle the operations with precision. Her face, once full of authority and arrogance, now displayed something closer to confusion and perhaps respect. Though she didn't speak to me, her presence was a constant reminder of the balance that had shifted. That evening, the family called a meeting. The dining room, once the stage of humiliation, now felt different. I entered calmly, papers in hand, greeted by tense, expectant eyes. Catherine avoided looking directly at me. "My parents," I began, addressing them with a steady voice, "you've seen the past and the present. I am not seeking approval tonight. I am sharing the results of years of preparation, dedication, and silent work. This building, this responsibility, is now in my hands, and I intend to honor it properly." There was a pause. My father cleared his throat. "Elena, you've truly handled this remarkably." His words were hesitant but genuine. My mother's eyes glistened, a mixture of pride and sorrow for the years they had allowed Catherine's dominance to overshadow me. Cousins and aunts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Derek, usually quick with sarcasm, remained silent. For the first time, I felt the full weight of family dynamics tilting in my favor, not through confrontation, but through undeniable competence and calm authority. Later that week, I held meetings with the tenants. Feedback poured in. Gratitude, respect, even surprise at how much care and attention I had invested. Repairs were prioritized, maintenance schedules improved, and tenants who had once quietly complained were now openly praising the new management. As the sun set, I stood on the rooftop of the building, looking over the city skyline. The lights of apartments flickered to life, one by one. Each light reminded me of the people I now served responsibly, the trust I had earned, and the quiet victory of standing tall in my own story. Catherine passed by outside, her heels clicking against the sidewalk. She stopped, paused, and glanced up at me. I met her gaze without fear or anger. "It's different now," she whispered, and I nodded once. Yes, it is. For the first time in decades, I felt steady, grounded, and entirely free. Not from revenge, not from others' approval, but from the weight of being underestimated. My story, my actions, and my success were mine. And for the first time, everyone could see it.
The evening after the family meeting, I sat alone in my office, the city lights painting long shadows across the walls. Silence wrapped around me, but it no longer felt heavy. It was a companion now, a reminder of how much I had endured, observed, and learned before anyone realized my quiet strength. I thought about the countless years of being in Catherine's shadow, the hushed critiques at family dinners, the condescending lectures, the subtle dismissals that stung more than words ever could. Each moment had been a test, a challenge to my patience and resilience. And though I had sometimes felt small, powerless, or invisible, I realized those moments had been shaping me in ways I hadn't appreciated. Patience, I learned, wasn't about waiting. It was about observing, understanding, and preparing. Humiliation had taught me empathy and strategic thinking, and the family's indifference had forced me to trust myself above all else. All the quiet, unnoticed hours spent studying the building's accounts, talking to tenants, planning renovations, they were the foundation of everything I had achieved tonight. My phone buzzed softly, breaking the reverie. A tenant had sent a message. "Thank you for fixing the heating system so quickly. It makes such a difference living here." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the work I had loved all along, solving problems, seeing potential where others saw obstacles, helping people feel at home. And now I could do it fully, without compromise or interference. Catherine's calls and messages had stopped, at least for now. I imagined her pacing, replaying every moment of the family confrontation in her mind. She had underestimated me for years, and in doing so, she had unwittingly prepared me for this exact moment. Her anger, her shock, even her attempts to assert control, they were all evidence of my growth. I realized that true power didn't come from loud words or dramatic gestures. It came from patience, preparation, and the courage to act when the time was right. It came from building quietly while the world assumed you were doing nothing. And tonight, as I looked around my office at the stacks of plans, tenant files, and letters, I felt a profound gratitude for every challenge, every dismissal, every moment of being overlooked.
The lessons extended beyond property management. They touched every part of life. The courage to stand firm, the wisdom to wait, the resilience to endure. I had learned to claim my space without demanding validation, to act decisively without needing applause, and to understand that sometimes survival alone could become its own form of justice. Later, I stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against my skin. I looked out at the city, at the streets and buildings I had walked past countless times, and I felt something shift deep inside me. I was no longer the sister who shrank in silence. I was no longer the underachiever, the overlooked one, the family charity case. I was a woman who had quietly built her own foundation, who had turned patience into power, and who had claimed her rightful place in her story. The journey hadn't been about revenge. It had been about understanding my own strength, about trusting myself when no one else did, and about finding freedom in the very silence that once felt suffocating. And as I stood there, feeling the city hum beneath me, I understood something vital. Being underestimated isn't a weakness, it's an opportunity to grow, to plan, to rise. I took a deep breath, letting the night air fill me with calm and resolve. My story was mine, and no one could take it from me. And in that moment, I felt not just free, but truly unstoppable. Chapter 8 focuses on Elena's introspection, personal growth, and the wisdom gained from years of patience and being underestimated, setting the stage for the final chapters that show long-term resolution and the impact on her relationships.
The days following the confrontation felt almost surreal. Word of what had happened at the family gathering spread quickly, first through whispers, then through cautious calls, and eventually in-person visits. It was as if the world I had lived in for decades, the one where Catherine's voice carried more weight than my own, was being quietly rewritten. Cousin Derek stopped by one afternoon, leaning casually against the lobby railing. His usual smugness was tempered with a newfound respect. "I never thought you'd actually pull it off," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "I mean, you really owned it. You've got guts, Elena." I smiled politely. "It's not about guts, Derek. It's about preparation, observation, and knowing your worth." Even Aunt Marjorie, who had always been the most vocal supporter of Catherine, approached me with hesitation, carrying a small tray of cookies. "Elena, you've really proven something. I didn't realize how capable you were. We all underestimated you." It was strange, this shift. The same family members who once nodded along with Catherine's critiques now found themselves unsure of what to say, how to act. The authority that had always belonged to her was no longer absolute, and the ripple of change extended beyond the family circle. It reached into the building itself. Tenants, once hesitant to voice concerns, now spoke freely. Requests were made with confidence, knowing I would address them personally. Repairs that had languished under Catherine's management were completed promptly. Small gestures, a freshly painted hallway, a repaired elevator, new security cameras, created a sense of trust and care that had been absent before. Catherine, meanwhile, became a shadow of her former self. She lingered outside occasionally, observing quietly from a distance. Her calls, once insistent and commanding, dwindled to hesitant inquiries. One afternoon, I saw her watching me from across the street. Her arms were crossed, face pale under the midday sun. She didn't approach, didn't speak. I met her gaze briefly and offered a calm nod. That small acknowledgement seemed to shake something loose within her. A recognition of my power, earned quietly but unmistakably. Later that evening, my parents called. The conversation was careful, measured. "Elena," my mother said, her voice tinged with guilt, we saw what happened. We never realized how strong you were, how much you'd been carrying quietly all these years. We're proud of you." I listened, letting the words sink in without interrupting. My father added, "It's strange to see Catherine stunned like that, but what matters is that you've claimed your place. You've handled it well. Truly well. I snarled softly. Thank you. But this isn't about proving her wrong anymore. It's about living my life fully, honestly, and without compromise. The rest will follow on its own. And it did. Over the weeks, Catherine's presence faded further. She no longer attempted to assert control. Even family dinners, once dominated by her lectures and subtle power plays, became spaces where I could exist freely. My voice heard, my choices respected. I realized something profound. Triumph isn't about crushing someone else. It's about standing so firmly in your own truth that the world has no choice but to acknowledge it. The quiet victory, the patient preparation, the calm endurance, it all mattered more than any dramatic confrontation. Standing on the balcony one evening, I watched the lights flicker in my building. Each apartment felt like a small victory. Each tenant a reminder of the care I now commanded. The power dynamics that had haunted my life for decades had shifted. Catherine's attempts to dominate were no longer relevant. I had quietly, firmly, and decisively changed the narrative. The lesson was clear. Sometimes being underestimated is a gift. It gives you the time, space, and clarity to prepare, to grow, and to rise in ways that others cannot anticipate. The ripple of change was only beginning, and I could feel it spreading through my family, my building, and most importantly, within myself. The weeks turned into months, and life in my building settled into a rhythm I had long imagined. Each day brought small victories, repairs completed, tenants expressing gratitude, renovations reflecting a vision of care rather than just profit. Yet the most profound changes were not in the walls or the floors, but in the people around me, and, most importantly, within myself. Catherine's attempts to challenge or undermine me ceased entirely. Her once commanding presence was replaced by quiet observation, a lingering awareness that the quiet sister she had dismissed now held undeniable authority. She would occasionally stop by, ostensibly to check on things, but her eyes betrayed hesitation. She no longer spoke condescendingly or attempted to dominate. She had realized, finally, that her control was gone. Family dynamics had shifted in ways that were subtle yet profound. Cousins who had once mocked or ignored me began seeking advice on minor matters, from investments to property management tips. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Ted admitted in quiet, hushed tones that they had misjudged my capabilities for years. My parents, too, seemed to recalibrate their perception, not out of obligation, but from recognition of the person I had become. One evening, my mother called me after a long day of managing tenant concerns and checking renovations. "Elena," she said softly, "I just want you to know that I've seen everything you've done. You've grown into someone I barely recognized, in the best way possible. I'm proud of you." Her words hit me with unexpected warmth. For so long, I had carried the silent burden of disapproval and indifference, feeling the weight of being overlooked. Now, the acknowledgement, even delayed, felt like a balm for years of quiet struggle. Catherine finally spoke directly to me one late afternoon, standing near the building's entrance. "You've changed everything," she whispered, voice unsteady. I underestimated you." I met her gaze calmly, without anger or malice. "No, Catherine, I haven't changed. I've just stopped letting you and anyone else define me or my story." Her silence was a surrender of sorts, a recognition that the quiet one had not only endured, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably steady. She turned and walked away, heels clicking against the sidewalk, leaving me with the profound realization that the greatest victories are often invisible until revealed. As I watched the city lights flicker across the streets, I reflected on the lessons learned from years of underestimation and silence. Patience is a weapon.
Preparation is power, and enduring humiliation with grace can forge an inner strength that no one can take away. The freedom I now felt wasn't just about owning a building or winning a confrontation. It was about owning my life, my decisions, and my voice. The tenants, the neighbors, even my family now recognized a new reality. Elena Irving was no longer the quiet, overlooked sister. I had quietly built a foundation that could not be shaken, a testament to resilience, intelligence, and steadfastness. And in this quiet victory, I found something I had long sought, not revenge, not applause, but peace. I walked through the freshly painted halls, listening to the hum of conversations, laughter, and life being lived fully. Every step reminded me that my strength had always existed, quietly, waiting for the right moment to surface. The building, once a symbol of limitation imposed by others, was now a testament to what could happen when preparation, patience, and courage met opportunity. Standing on the rooftop one last time, I let the cool night air fill my lungs. I had claimed more than property. I had claimed my story. My sister's attempts to crush me had failed, not because I fought, but because I had grown, because I had planned, because I had endured, and because I finally understood that survival, perseverance, and self-belief are the true measures of victory. I whispered to the night, to the city, and perhaps to myself, "You are not defined by the voices that underestimate you. You are not bound by the roles others force on you. You are the author of your own story, and no one can take that away." The quiet was no longer heavy. It was empowering. And for the first time, I felt fully, profoundly free.